our guest here today. Rick FATZINGER has been in the fashion production and special events industry for over 20 years. He is currently the director at SBI, where he has worked on the event production and the creator of the sets for trade shows like for Chanel, Nike, and many other amazing trade shows. And he is also was also the co-founder of Hammock Trade Show. And I'm also very proud to say that he is one of my dearest friends. So I am blessed to have him here, and I am so excited for him to share his knowledge with us today. So without further ado, Rick FATZINGER.
Thank you, Cece. And I'm glad in your introduction you didn't talk about how many more than 20 years that I've been doing this, but it has been more than 20 years. I know you have questions about trade show. I can start with that, and I have some photos that I pulled from trade shows that we've worked on in the past 5 or 6 years. But let's start sort of back towards a more general overview of what a trade show is. Is there, I don't know how familiar you are with trade shows. By the way, too, if anybody has any questions, please just jump right in, ask. I'd love to do it that way as a conversation. I'm happy to stop at any point to answer questions. Trade show in general, not even talking specifically about fashion, but just a trade show, think of it like a marketplace, an exhibition. But if you're not familiar at all with it, think of it of like going to a farmer's market or going to a flea market where you see a lot of booths from different vendors. Some of them are small. Some of them might only have 20, 25 participants. Some of them might have 1,000 participants. They can take place in hotels, in convention centers. Sometimes they can take place outside. There's really rules for what the parameters are, but in general, the definition of a trade show is sort of an exhibition where there are buyers and sellers. So in other words, the people with the booths are showing some sort of goods, and the guest that comes in to see the show are looking to buy those goods. There's different types of trade shows as well from a business standpoint. Some trade shows are business to business. Meaning that maybe it's like a fabric manufacturer that's selling to a designer, or an accessories manufacturer that makes buttons is selling to fashion designers. And then others are a direct-to-consumer show. There are a lot of beauty shows where retail beauty brands show up, put on a big demonstration, and try to sell directly to the customer. And so there's different types. And then in those trade shows, I know you're specifically studying fashion, but trade shows are in a lot of different industries. Of course, fashion, beauty, different sports industries, boating and yachting. And within those, there's even subcategories. One just happened over the past 3 days. Every year for the Super Bowl, there's a big trade show that happens around it that involves all sorts of things related to football, but all things related to sports. And they have it in the city where the Super Bowl is taking place each year, but it's a giant forum for anybody that wants to buy a space to talk about what they're trying to sell. And that's a direct-to-consumer show. So that's a good example of one that just happened. Last year, when the Super Bowl was in, the whole convention center transformed into this giant trade show, which was a sports-related trade show with all sorts of things, from sports equipment to sports clothing to different kinds of sports, but all sports related, that happened in the kind of week preceding the Super Bowl itself. Cece, I guess we can talk about who attends, or do you have another direction you want to go, or?
No, I mean, we can talk about, so can anybody participate in a trade show? What are the qualifications for both the participant and whoever can walk in?
Good point. Because there are different types as well. So as you can see from the different industries, there's different types of trade shows. So of course, there's different requirements for participants. So for a business to business type trade show, you can only participate, one, if you sell to business. If you only sell direct to consumer and you're looking to sell anything to a business environment, you wouldn't be invited to go. Second, there are private and more public types of trade shows, but generally you need to receive some sort of invitation or apply to participate. And the requirements are specific to a type of trade show, specific to a type, meaning an industry type trade show. So for instance, there are very specific shows in fashion for, trying to think how to describe this best. Let's go very specific to a swimwear trade show, a swim and resort trade show, which is what Cece and I are most familiar with. There are trade shows that garner support from a particular type of brand. So there might be surf brands versus couture brands, and not all of those go to the same trade show. Or there's a larger trade show that might encompass those different things, but in different sections of the show. So participation first relates to what do you do, who do you sell to, and then do you qualify under those parameters? And then secondly, do they want you there? And that may sound very subjective, and it is. There are very specific brands, for instance, as a trade show owner, that I'm looking to have in our trade show. And even though a brand might qualify, I might just not think that they fit for the categories that we're trying to get represented.
Rick, let's do this as like kind of a more specific thing, so it's not so like in the clouds. Let's talk about Hammock, and then talk about like when you were looking at brands, what were some things that you were looking for, and what would make you say no, so that it's a little bit, so that it's easier to digest this.
Sure. The trade show that we own is a very boutique type show, meaning we're not a huge show. We ranged from, when we started the show, to 20 some brands, to the most we ever had was about 100. And within that, we had 2 or 3 categories of surf brands and a little bit more couture style of swimwear, if you want to call it that. So when we looked at a brand, first we looked, what do we have already in that category and what do we need to fill? What press and marketing does a brand have? What online presence do they have? What stores do they sell to? And those are the first kind of category things that we looked at. If we liked what we saw there, and it's a very subjective thing, we liked what we saw there, then we would look a little deeper and talk to the brand about what their goals are. Have they showed in any other types of shows recently? Made sure that their online information was up to date, and then we would decide. So we were looking to fill certain categories for the sort of upper end market. And so we also had a price range that we were looking for. And again, that's a very arbitrary number, but we picked sort of a price range that we wanted to stay above. And that's not to say the other brands, if they had a lower price range, there's anything wrong with them. It's just not who we wanted represented in the show. And I think that's important to the people that attend the show from the buyer side, so we could represent to them what types of brands were going to be there. And if the kind of store that they had fit those brands, they know they could come and find brands that would fit their store, even if they didn't know them. And that's part of also the magic of what you're trying to accomplish at the trade show is making sure you fit that together. What brands fit with what buyers, whether they know them or not. So existing customers, but also new customers. Does that answer?
So yes, let me delve there a little bit more so for instance, if I am a brand and I wholesale at $40, which would then make my product retail at about 100, right? Then then I'm in a certain category. But if you are looking for brands that are retail at 250, then chances are I don't fit into your show and I should look somewhere else.
Right. And they don't know that. So that's what you have to let them know, that's what our show's about, and that's why they wouldn't fit. But then you'd also obviously about who we invite to the show from the buyer side. So that's again why we make that differential, because then we can advertise to buyers that are coming to our show. These are the types of brands you're going to see. You're going to see more, upper end brands. Their price ranges in this. They've had, articles in XYZ publications. They sell to this other stores, which should be competitors to what the buyer's coming to see. Coming to look for things in that equivalent market. So yes, that is why, but also from both sides, from the buyer and the seller side.
Great. And so tell me, what was your motivation? I mean, especially like there are a lot of shows out there. When you started Hammock, there was already a big show that had the swim market. And then, of course, if you go to New York, you see that there is, there's Coterie, there's DNA. Why, when there's already a big show that has kind of the market cornered, for this type of market, why the market cornered for the market? Sorry, my English language skills not so good today. Why start a competing show? What is the catalyst for that?
Before we started the show, before I owned a trade show, I produced several booths for different brands, some in fashion, some in beauty. And the time we were producing fashion shows, we received a lot of comments from designers that we produced the show for that they weren't happy with the trade show. They didn't feel it represented them. They got stuck, and we were producing fashion shows for upper end, but a smaller type brands that didn't have a gigantic presence. And so sometimes those brands at the trade show got placed beside a giant brand that had a 10,000 square foot space, and they had a 100 square foot space, so they felt lost. At that time, the bigger swim show that existed in Miami didn't categorize the brands. They could get placed anywhere. Now, since then, they've changed that model, we think, somewhat based on us coming in and trying to corner one section of that market and then realizing that that's what brands are looking for. But they weren't represented. They didn't feel like they had an equal voice to larger brands. They got lost in the larger show where there were hundreds of brands, and we were advertising a smaller show. We were advertising an intimate market. We were advertising a hotel style show versus a convention style show, which also gave them a private suite that they could invite buyers into. They could offer them champagne. And they could show their resort wear in the environment that people that buy it would wear it. And we felt that was important. We felt that was important from both ends, for the seller to be able to show their swimwear look that way, for the buyer to be able to see it in that environment. And it worked. So we were a very niche market, and we were looking for brands who fit that and who had the interest for those reasons and were willing to pay more. And the one other point of difference in starting the show is we provided more. But the larger show basically sold a space, and you could come in and do whatever you wanted with the space. We sold a turnkey package that included merchandise equipment, that included food and beverage service for both the buyers and them. They could buy meals as part of it. It included a guest room that you could stay in either with your showroom or separate from that. So we were offering a different type of service for a different type of brand.
And so let's talk about pricing. I mean, as you know, when a designer, or rather, when a brand is looking to make an investment, what is the investment in a trade show package? And is and was there a huge price differential in what you were getting at, and what it could be at one show versus another, or are they relatively equal?
It's an important question. It's a big issue that young brands struggle with, is when do I make that sort of investment? Because the investment's not just for buying a booth space. Say you're going to be in a convention center. It's what am I going to do in that booth space? How am I going to show my brand? And that's something we want to get into a little bit more now, is what you do with that space. You get a booth, you don't just show up with a rack, put your clothes on it, and expect people to buy it. You have to create an environment. And in a convention center, that environment could cost a lot more because you're starting, as we talked about, with an empty space. You have, they give you walls, sometimes not even walls. They'll give you curtains sometimes for a blank space. The difference with the hotel brand, and this leads to answering your question, is that you already had a complete showroom. The hotel room, we picked a higher end hotel. In all the years we've done the show, both hotels that we've used have a higher end look. And so price wise, even though you may look like that initial cost is more, when you look at trying to build a space out to something that represents your brand, those costs become much closer. So although our upfront costs seemed higher for the show that we did versus the larger show that existed, when you compare apples to apples for what you need to put into a say, convention center show, we came out pretty close in our mind. Now, some designers didn't always agree with that. They didn't have to participate in the show. And then we also looked like there was a lot of pluses beyond that. Some of the things I mentioned, we provided additional services, we provided additional amenities that we felt these upper end brands would like, and that the buyers would like, and that it would attract buyers to the show. So sometimes it's, you could actually spend less on different shows, but you have to look at, what are my goals? What am I trying to accomplish? What do I want my brand to look like to the buyers? And then what do I have to spend on that? So that, going back to a young brand, it's a lot of money, because that's just putting the booth together or the space together for your showroom look. You also have to think about, where is the show? I have to fly there. I have to stay in a hotel. I have to have meals. I have to have transportation. I probably have to have a salesperson come along and pay them to do it. So it's a big investment, and it's a very difficult decision to, when do I start that? What is the point that my brand is ready to show? And it needs to be based on, where I am with my marketing. Do I have any sales already? And can I further those sales through this show or not? We did have a couple of brands that literally launched their swim collection with our show and got lucky and got a big sale. We had others that didn't. And then next year they're gone. So it is a big decision. It's something that you can make the right decision and the wrong decision with the same decision to do the show. So you don't always know until afterwards. But it's also something that we learned over time too. We just didn't accept new brands, even if they look great and met the other criteria, if we didn't feel like they could have some success. And that leads to a whole nother series of questions of, how do I get buyers to come to the show, to see my booth in any type of show? And that's based on previous relationships that you have through, hopefully working your way up into the point you are in the industry, and then building new relationships with pre-marketing, sending out information to buyers ahead of time about what your brand, what you're going to be doing at the show, what you're going to preview at the show, why it's important for a buyer to see it. And those efforts are extremely important. You definitely never, ever want to go to a show with no appointments booked and just expect people to stop by and expect that to be successful. Has it ever happened? Of course, but your chances of success are much less if you do it that way. And that goes for not just even in fashion, but any type of industry. You want to have pre-established appointments, or at least pre-established communication that buyers plan to stop by and look at your product, whether that buyer is a consumer, whether that buyer is a wholesale buyer. But you want to get the information out ahead of time and get some sort of feedback to know that large investment you're making is going to be worth it.
Right. I want to make a quick point, and then we have some questions. I want to make a quick point about, I remember recently, before COVID, I did an accessory show with one of my clients at the Jazz Center, and my client was flying in from Europe, and so I was much more heavily invested in the day to day of what it would cost, the minutia of the of every item, like every itemized thing, for the booth, where every outlet was costing us money, where
Yep.
every, if we, so like, that's something I think that if you're not involved in, you might not realize that every time you need an extra light, every time you need an outlet, every time somebody has to bring you thing, every you might need a rack, you might need, you've decided that you needed another chair, whatever it is, it's more and more money. We had the tiniest booth at the accessory show, and it cost us over $20,000. I mean, it's a tremendous amount of money to spend, and that did not include the amount of money that they spent to fly in, the amount of money that it cost them to fly in, all of the good of the of the products that they had to store them. The storage was unbelievable, like the storage cost until they could themselves get here
Yep.
because it was so weighty. So things like that, everybody really needs, these are things I think people don't put into, like really think about, because you're like, oh, okay, the booth is 7,000. Okay, 7,000. And then you're like, but then all the rest of it comes in and you're like,
Yeah.
what?
No, and the
So
bigger the show, the more that comes into play. I've produced just many booths for different types of shows that in convention centers where there's union labor, and unions are great. I support them completely. But at a union house trade show, you're going to pay. You mentioned a couple of things like a chair. You might pay $50 just to rent a chair for the couple of days of the show. You're going to pay labor at $150 to $250 an hour. And if you have to use it, if you're doing anything more than carrying what you can carry in a suitcase, you have to use their labor. So this is, I've worked with several brands that just fall off their chair when they get initial estimates from the in-house vendors that you have to use at trade shows, when it goes into the tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars to do things that will cost much less in another environment. But you have to remember, you're coming into a space where there's a whole bunch of people coming to it. Work within the rules so that you're not tramping on each other, because everybody has to get set up in the same time. And,
right.
and I mean, there's reasons that those costs exist, but they do seem exorbitant to a lot of people. But it's still struggle to understand it when you get those kind of bills, though, for simple things like a chair or a light, and they're hundreds and hundreds of dollars for things that you could go out and buy it for less and use it for the show.
Well, between us and the flies on the wall, it does seem like a bit of a mafia, business
Yes.
model.
No, I've literally had just union labor, just labor alone bills that are six figures for just the help that we got to help set up and strike an event. So that actually leads to if you want to take 1 second, I can show some pictures of booths I put together. Most of them not fashion. I think those sometimes are more interesting. Most of them are in beauty. Let's see if I can do this right and share my screen. There, can everybody see that?
Yes.
Good. Now let's see if I know how to advance it. So this happened to be a fashion one, but it shows you the types of things that brands do at shows. This was for, a lot of people know this, they see the retail outlets, the U.S. Polo Association. This was quite a while ago, actually. This one I think is the oldest image I have on here, from 2015, but it was in a kind of casual wear show that we did for them, but they wanted to set up to look like kind of a polo lounge. And so we built a whole booth for them. And even back in 2015, this, I think, our costs were like 35,000. The labor costs were probably another 50,000 to do it. So just, and that's not the cost of the booth. That's not the cost of any of the brand had. That's just for the setup that you see here. All right, how do I advance? Okay, now just need to figure out how to get to the next one.
I'm sorry, how much did you say this one was, just to create the booth?
Our costs to the client were about 35,000, and I think it was about the same for the union labor to help get it set up in the show.
Just so 70,000 just for the
and
look
that,
of it.
And that was in 2015. Why am I not? Hold on 1 second.
So if you just press one of the arrows forward, it should go.
That's what I'm doing. It's not working here.
We lost him.
Oh, did we lose you?
No, sorry, I just muted myself. Sorry. I can't make the PowerPoint.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't do it. Anything should.
If you guys have questions, just keep putting them in the chat, and then I will. I'll start asking them as soon as we're ready.
I'm sharing the screen. They can all see it. But sorry. Just there we go.
No,
What'd you do? No, you can. Okay, sorry. This was a booth we did actually for a show in Toronto for Tissot watches. And very small booths, sometimes they can be very small. It was one demonstration, I believe, we had a 4x6 booth. And this was a custom kind of drum and watch display we put on top to show it. And this was actually at a trade show, as I was describing, for kind of the Super Bowl, except it was for the All-Star basketball game for the whole division that was taking place in Toronto that year. I did a whole series of trade show booths for Beauty Blender. I'm sure if it's a makeup brand. Just wanted to show the difference. We did shows for them. I did shows in Hong Kong, in Paris, in Vegas, in New York. These were 1 year, we did one campaign. And this shows some of the different things that we did for the same campaign, but in different environments. So this a particular one was for the show, well, actually, there's a couple of them here. This was the show in Vegas, and at the bottom right, I believe, was a different show. But again, this was quite an expensive booth. We did custom light boxes. We did, if you even notice, the stanchions and ropes are made out of beauty blenders. We did a lot of custom work for it, and then shipped some of the very custom pieces around. But this is how complex it can get. And again, this has nothing to do with the cost that they paid to be in the show. This had nothing to do with their staff and everything. This was just the setup of the booth itself. But they had a very particular look they wanted, and we developed these custom pieces for that. So this is definitely kind of a six-figure type arrangement that we do for a beauty show. The other thing to mention is this was a business-to-business show for Sephora. For the store itself, they have their own trade shows. So they invite their store managers for the brands that are in Sephora store to come to these shows to talk about and think about what they want to carry in their store. So it's not even uniform, that these brands have to sell to the individual stores, and this is how they attract them.
Well, Rick, real quick, do you come up with the creative, or is the creative given to you, or is it
It's a mix. Sometimes we start from scratch. Most of the time they have something or some idea that they want, and then we help them develop that into something that would work for the booth. But it literally goes the gamut from A to Z in helping them come up with it. They have a full idea, and we just have to figure out how to execute it. So it really ranges. This another type. This was actually just a simple booth we did for movies. You know, I actually most probably too young, but used to call a number and what movie's playing. So date this one was. But again, it was a custom kind of set piece for it. Otherwise, pretty simple. This actually, it's in the wrong order. This is what Beauty Blender looked like before we took over their account. So that was what they did in the trade show first. And then that's what we did with it. So it also can show the difference in costs between getting some streamers and a couple graphics and doing the other thing. So
it's more exciting when you took it over.
And they chose to invest more money in it, and that's what we did with it. So yeah. This was the same booth we did as the previous one I showed you, but in Hong Kong. At a Hong Kong show. It wasn't specifically for Sephora. This was one of the largest shows I actually worked in. There were thousands of brands in the show. It was quite something to watch them put that together as well from an execution standpoint. And interesting from ours to figure out how to do it and how to get the pieces that we had to ship there sent overseas. And so it was an interesting experience. And I've done a couple shows in Hong Kong.
So when you have to go to Hong Kong, you set it up, I guess that takes a day. And then do you stay there for the length of the show? And is that vacation time for you? And then the last
Yeah.
day you put it, I mean, you know, when the show is over, you pack it up and then come back? Or what do you do during the show?
I wouldn't quite call it vacation, but yes, I do. I'm basically on call. If anything they need during the show, if anything goes wrong, then the lights stop working, it's up to me to fix it. So I actually do even stop by each morning of the show and make sure everything is up to par for what needs before it opens that day. But yes, during the show itself, if everything's going well, my work's limited.
Oh, so then you can just go and have a good time and
yeah, I get to see Hong Kong. Yes.
And are you paid? Like, so, I mean, I guess if somebody chose to go into this field and they're lucky enough to have a client that's international, are you basically paid to, you know, to be there? You have a stipend, your hotel is paid for?
Yeah, of course, the client pays for your travel, not my company. And that's just something that's part of what we bill them for. You know, and you establish those kind of parameters ahead of time to make sure that you're put up in a hotel that you're acceptable. And, you know, after a length of time that I worked, I also, if I'm flying that far, I have parameters for my flight as well. I'm not going to fly to Hong Kong economy for a client, you know, so they have to pay to fly me the way that I'm comfortable flying to do the work they want me to do. So yes, once you get to a certain point, you can.
And what is that? Is that business? Is that first?
Yeah, it is business.
What are you comfortable flying?
If I fly more than 6 hours, I fly business. So yes. This was from a show in New Orleans, which they actually do a gigantic show each year. This was the header that we did. We did this big arch for the beauty and lifestyle section of it. So that's what you can see. There's a couple kind of in progress, and the one on the right is when it was complete during the show. So kind of show you that. Just kind of give you different examples. This was a golf show in Orlando, Florida, a couple years ago. Again, kind of custom booth, and ours was particularly for 4A golf. Then for 2 seasons, it was a full year, we actually did a campaign for Revlon and Almay. And so when I say a campaign, we launched the campaign with a show in New York that had nothing to do with the trade show. It was launching their campaign for the year. But then we followed through that with a series of shows around the country at different trade shows, some of them business to business, some of them to business consumer, where we then took that campaign and the style of what we did for the launch party, and we transferred it to a trade show booth. So this was kind of a Be Bold campaign for Revlon, and Almay had more this kind of color look that they were going. And there's certain places we did the booths separate, and sometimes we did them together. This particular one you're seeing here is a show we did in Texas for one store that, again, kind of like the Sephora show, but it was looking for all their stores. And so we did the booths together. That's just how the brand wanted represented. But of course, you can see with the distinct split to it. And then that was that's actually a Matrix brand for professional services. So this was a business to business show. I think that was the same show. We had 2 booths we did there. This is taking that same campaign, the Almay campaign, and doing it at a different show on the left. This was the consumer show in New York, and the Revlon, same campaign. We just altered the look of it a little bit for the consumer show in New York, the huge beauty show in New York that happens every spring. This is from the trade show that we own, Hammock. This was from 2018 at the One Hotel. Again, kind of shows you the style of the show we did. We're always looking for high end, but you can see it's boutique with a lot of, you know, the walls and things that we provide are custom. And so it gives the trade show just a little higher end look. Compared to, if you go down to the bottom right corner, it's a kind of an earlier version of it where it's a little bit more, I would say lower end, a little less style to it. So those are a couple different years of the Hammock show. And a few more pictures, same thing. You can see how, you know, this is what trade show booth where it's just showing fashion. They're not trying to show off too much about the brand itself look like.
Yeah, very plain.
Yep. This was the end of our campaign with the Revlon and Ame series, where this was actually a show in Los Angeles. But it can show you the scale, as you see on the left, of how big these things can get. That's an 18-foot high wall that we did. So it really can be quite elaborate, and bigger brands that are trying to show some big campaign can spend a lot of money to do an individual show. This was a multi-dollar campaign over the year for these different shows. So brands do spend money on this to show off a new campaign, to impress consumers, and to impress even wholesalers. This was a campaign we did for Adidas 2 summers ago. To show some kind of custom pieces and different things that a brand wants to do to represent it. We did it again as a launch party in New York, and then we carried through to a couple sports shows throughout the year. But it can vary from even just interactive games that the brand wants consumers or businesses, the representatives, to play, to, again, it's all to sell the shoes, but when a brand has some money to spend, they want to create a feeling. So we help them create an environment to create that feeling to want to buy the shoe.
I love this one.
Yep, this is actually, there's two. The bottom right is Rimmel, and then the left and the top right are CoverGirl. This was the beauty show in Los Angeles. We did a couple years ago as well. Just shows you, again, some of the different things that the way brands look to represent themselves at these shows. Can be very industrial looking, is the Rimmel in the bottom right, and can be very consumer looking. You want to look like your bathtub in your bedroom, the left side. Same show, we did the Kiss, which is also another makeup brand, did their booth as well. A lot of these brands want to have photo moments, which is what we set up on the right. People come take their picture with the brand name in it. Again, brand recognition, big part of what a lot of these shows, particularly consumer shows, are trying to get across. And then it can range to these are much smaller things. This was a very small show. It was business to business. This was the little wall we set up for Facebook. This was actually in Miami at the Faena Art Center, where it was about 25 brands. But it was very specific for an industry show. Sarah, this was summer of 2019. I think that's it.
So 2 questions. A, what is it that you do specifically? And if somebody wanted to do what you do, what do they need to know?
My title is a producer. And so as producer, you probably see that title on entertainment things as in television or movies. And it's the same type of work. I put the pieces together, and that's how I describe it to people. So from a technical aspect, from a logistics aspect, from a creative aspect, anything so somebody comes to me with a project and I take it from there. If they come and they have an idea, great. Sometimes they come and they don't have an idea, and I have to help them create that idea. So that's from the design side. From the technical side, I deal with staging, sets, lighting, audio, video, power, any custom pieces, rentals, staffing, catering, if it's an event. From a logistics standpoint, I deal with the venue, sometimes having to find the venue. And then once we have a venue, working with the venue. Do we need any permits for this? Do we need to hire security? So those are all things under my purvey as a producer. And of course, I have a team that helps me with it, from a larger standpoint. For these trade shows, it can involve all those things, but for specifically with the goal of creating a trade show booth that the client's looking for. How did I start? I didn't start in this at all. I started it from the business side, and I started specifically with fashion show production. The company that I first worked for, that's all we did, is we produced fashion shows in New York. It was very specific. Then some of our clients began hiring us to produce events that were related to fashion, but not specifically shows. And then it went from there. So I started as doing fashion shows. That there used to be 4 seasons of fashion shows in New York. We did all 4 seasons. I maybe did, 30, 40 shows a year for those 4 individual seasons. And then for, brands that were just doing shows off season as well. But that's how I started.
But you didn't originally, it was never like you wanted to get into fashion particularly. No. That wasn't like your passion. It's just something that you fell into, right?
Yes. I was a businessman. My very first job, I was a business manager for a photorealist painter.
I mean, I would say one of the things I could say about you is that you are, what's that?
I said,
sorry, Rick, what'd you say?
I originally worked for an artist. I was a business manager. In fact, the print that's behind me is from that artist. And so my background was in business management. And 2 of my friends in New York started a fashion show production company, but had no idea how to start a business. So I partnered with them to help start the business. But as you guys will learn in any small business, or you might have learned already, you wear a lot of hats. So as the business manager for a small company, we all start helping produce the shows and work on those. So that's how I learned about it. I learned about it by watching my friends doing it. That became more interesting to me than the business management side, and I ended up started producing.
But what and again, I know this about you because we've known each other for so long, is that one of the reasons that you are so successful and that you are so good to work with is that the fashion industry, and especially when you're in the midst of a lot of chaos, a lot of people are not organized in the fashion industry, and things can really fall apart very, very quickly. And things are, people are stressed, and anyway, things can really go wrong very quickly. But what I love in working about you is that you are level-headed, and you are one of the most organized people I have ever met. And so there is this feeling of security when working with you, because your lists are so on par. And and they're, and that I think comes from your business background. That comes from the fact that you are not, you give people the sense of like, it's okay, I've thought about it, it's done. It doesn't come from, you're creative, but you know how to do all of these other components. And I think that is what makes you, that's such a strength. And I think people really need to understand that a successful business, whether it's a fashion business, any creative, needs to have that other component, somebody
Yes.
who can do that other part.
Absolutely. And what you're saying is one of the kind of unwritten rules when we were selecting brands, even for our trade show. You can go back to your previous question. If we met and talked with a brand and realized that they didn't have that business side, that business manager, we generally didn't accept them to the show. There's a lot of very creative people, specifically in fashion, that can design things, great, but they can't manage the other side of it. They can't manage pricing. They can't manage how to get the goods, or they can't manage deliveries. And you need someone to be able to do that, or your business will fail. From what I do, production is all about details. So all the things I mentioned, they all have more details underneath them, and managing those details is what we do. And so clients hire us so that they don't have to manage those details. So from the production side, that is why we're hired. We're hired to be a one-stop shop for managing everything that you think of and that you don't think of. And if there's anything that goes wrong before, during, or after the event, it's my fault. It doesn't matter if it's not my fault, it's still my fault. If the weather is bad, it's my fault. And so I have to come up with alternatives. What happens if? I have to ask that question about everything that could possibly happen. And things, look, in the last year, we've had this happen. Last year at this time, right now in February, I had 26 events on my schedule. Within 30 days after that, I had 0. By the 18th of March, COVID had shut us down completely, but I still had to manage things. There were events that didn't quite get canceled. Can we postpone it? Can we turn it into something different? All of that was part of the discussion during the same time last year, and all part of my job, even though before the pandemic, before this came up, we never knew that existed. You know, during September 11th, 2001, we were in the middle of New York Fashion Week. We had just finished 3 shows, and you know, the towers got hit. The planes got driven to the towers in the middle of Fashion Week. It took 24 hours for Fashion Week to decide if they were going to continue or not. We had clients calling us right and left. What do we do? What do we do? What do we do? So it's always, and it's our fault. We had to figure it out. Some shows got canceled. Some shows we figured out how to do it, postponed to a later time. But all of that is part of your job, whether you like it or not.
I understand.
So it's not always fun, but of course that's the responsibility. So the part that I like about it, and I still do, is it is a performance type job. You finish something like this, you finish these booths, even that some of the ones I showed you, or a live event, and you can see the results, you can see the success, and people show up, and people are impressed by the way it looks. When you have solutions to problems before they come up, that's the satisfaction you get from a job well done. So it, you know, yes, you're responsible for a lot of things, but if you do it right, you also, the reward is a very successful event with a very happy client, and the reward is seeing what you've done. It's a physical representation of success.
So let me ask you some questions from the students. Leo is asking, as an emerging designer, do you recommend doing both a fashion show and a trade show? And in your history with trade shows, what are the benefits of a trade show in relationship to fashion shows?
Yeah, they're 2 different things. And I believe for most brands, 2 different times that you would want to look to do those. And again, it's based on your business model and what your goals are and where your marketing is. So it's not an easy question to answer, but I think both are important. I think trade shows are what you need to start with to be successful and get sales. I think fashion shows are when you get to a certain level and you have something to show from a press and marketing standpoint. And the fashion show industry is in a huge flux right now. Used to, when I started and the time I was doing it regularly, had a completely different purpose than what somebody does a show for now. It used to be that you did a fashion show 2 seasons before that was going to be in a store. And it was to get press. It was to get celebrities to be in a magazine, to get your collection seen in the following months in publications. Now, things you see on the runway, you can buy off the runway, or if not right then, within a few weeks after. So it's changed completely on that timing. So when you do a fashion show, that question has a little bit of difference now, and I think it's going to evolve over time. But I do think trade shows would be something you would think about first to get a wider base of who you're selling to. Fashion shows a bit later as a marketing tool to explode your brand more.
Great. This is an interesting question. I'm interested to see how you're going to answer this. How do trade shows make money?
The trade show itself, or the participants?
No, the trade show, I think Jane's asking. So, I mean,
we have to charge enough to the brand participating in the show to make more money than what it's going to cost us to put it together. That's basically how we make money, and it is difficult because there's things we have to do to promote the show and everything. So it's a complicated budget, but that's how in the amount that we charge for the package, as we call it, to put together. We have to make the money off of that. That's our primary income. You know, a couple of times we'll have a few sponsors, but that's much smaller level than the actual package price. So it's good budgeting is how we make money. Looking at it ahead of time, deciding what we have to sell our packages at, and then being able to sell those, being able to sell out your show. I guess that would be the other way you don't make money, is if you have a bunch of empty spaces, you're not going to make money. So you need to have the right marketing tools, the things we talked about at the beginning, securing good brands that buyers want to come and it's a success, so that you can increase your price a bit and make a bit more. It is possible.
It is possible.
A lot of work is possible.
We both know it's hard, but
yeah. I love the question I just saw in the chat. Do you have time for a personal life? Um, no, is the answer to that. You find that the kind of work I do happens all times of the day and all days of the year. Um, I've done events over every single holiday that exists, including many on my birthday, New Year's Eve, Christmas, Thanksgiving. You pick the holiday, I've worked on that holiday, sometimes year after year for years in a row. But you find that you do get downtime. You have busy times and you have quieter times, and you take advantage of quieter times. They're just not when everybody else has quiet times. And with what I do, I can't plan very far ahead. So I do have quiet times and I do take time off, but a lot of times time that I plan to take off doesn't end up to be the time that I can. And so my family has learned this over the years. I cannot plan a family vacation for next year. Just can't happen. So what I do, that's part of the career path that I've chosen, is I understand that my schedule is controlled by what clients I have and what jobs I have. And Cece knows too, there's only 1 week of the year that I take off, but all of my clients know it and ahead of time, and then they plan ahead. And if they really want me to work on something, they won't plan it that 1 week. 1 week of the year I do take off, and I go a place where you can't even get cell phone signal. But that's the only time. That's the only time I can turn off my phone. That's the only time I don't check my email. Is 1 week a year.
Right. And also his partner is an angel.
Well, and who's been in the industry. You have to, and the other part of what I can say is you usually end up a lot of your closest friends are also in the industry. One being the one that's on the screen just to the left of me. You end up, meeting people within the work you do that you become friends with. So several of my closest friends are somehow related in this industry. So it is the type of work you do that's very intensive, and so you can develop relationships through the work itself.
What are your favorite luxury swimwear brands that participated in Hammock? And what about their business model, goals, and online presence made them stand out to you?
My particular job and what I did for Hammock, I didn't select the brands, so I can't speak to that. that was my partner's job, and that's the other way you look at it. You have to compartmentalize what you do. My job, I produced the show, so I dealt with the venue. I dealt with putting together what the show was going to look like, the overall aesthetic. I did deal with sales, but mostly from a procedural standpoint. We wrote the contracts, we helped process the contracts with my assistant. So I didn't really, some of the things I know what we do, and so I was involved in that process, but I didn't do it myself, so didn't answer that. I would say my favorite brand that I liked having in the show was Miko.
I would also say that it is an unforgiving and ungrateful business sometimes.
Can be, yes.
There are people who you help, who are who you give so much to because they need it in the beginning, and they take it. They are happy to take your help, and the minute that they are in a position where they see that they can do something else, somebody else will get them something or whatever, they will immediately forget anything that you have ever done for them. So it is a very
loyalty is scarce.
Yeah, so it is a little, it will make you a little bit bitter, the fashion industry. It will certainly it certainly takes away that little, bright and shiny world. It's just that kind of life.
But it is those, and you have to look at it from their standpoint. Sometimes they make business decisions that may look like being unloyal. I do agree with you. We've had many times where we felt stabbed in the back. But, I've also developed personal relationships that whether, designer chooses to be in a show or chooses even to hire me again, I've still developed a personal relationship that'll continue. But yes, it's a very cutthroat business because there are so many people trying to succeed in it. So.
Yeah. What is a business venture? Um, Haley, do you want to ask the question that you're trying to ask? Because I'm not sure what you mean.
Yeah, sorry, it was so confusing. I was just wondering, like, is this something that you had to invest money in to get it started? Like, how did this trade show get its like first foot in the ground, basically?
Yeah, for the trade show itself, yes. So my job, no. I mean, I have a job, but the trade show itself, when we decided to start it, yes, we had to invest money in it. We did it a little on the slide, meaning that we were able to start getting some money in. We basically, when we started the show, we didn't say we were going to start it until we had a showroom that had at least 10 brands that knew were going to participate in the show say yes. So we kind of did it simultaneously. We started the show, made the deal with the hotel, and had this showroom sign on. So we knew we had some pretty guaranteed income, but we did have to put some money up front to do it. Yes. At the time I had my own production company as well. So we knew we had a way to execute the show for relatively low cost because it was our labor. We were putting the time in. So one of the big investments that we put in was time. We spent, quite a bit of time doing that, particularly the first 5 years of figuring out what was going to work. So yes, time is an investment, some cash, but mostly time. Lots and lots of time.
Caitlin asks if there's an emerging designer that you had at your show that became a more established brand from the exposure at your trade show.
That's what I can think of just off the top of my head is Frankie's. Are they still around? Frankie's still around?
Of course, Frankie's is still around.
They launched at our show. Like literally, they had zero sales. They had barely had a collection together to even show. And they did a $40,000 sale during that first show, which then launched their business. Now she had a little bit of financial backing to do it, but that's what I can think of. And then they got bigger.
Yes. So. Now Frankie's is sold all over the world. She now does the Paris show. So she's like at a completely other level. Exactly. Caitlin asks, is there any emerging oh, sorry, that was that question. Do you think it's practical for smaller brands to avoid trade shows until they can handle the cost?
Absolutely. And they should. And they should think about it very thoughtfully before they do a trade show. Because the worst thing you can do is to do a show or two shows, not get the sales you counted on, and go under. And I've seen it happen too many times. So particularly with everything that we're doing right now, with virtual, you can conduct business without doing it. Now, I think it's necessary, and I think trade shows will come back. I think I saw a question earlier about how is COVID affected. COVID is totally affected. There haven't been trade shows. I think there have been a couple in Europe now that, now they can't even have them there, but it has devastated the fashion industry in general, not just from a show standpoint, but from a trade show standpoint, from a manufacturing standpoint. China closed down for 2 months. Most of our clothing gets made in China. And so all of the timelines got behind very quickly, right along from February, March of last year, things weren't getting made. So even if trade shows in the United States had happened, there wouldn't have been any clothes there because just the manufacturing timeline got messed up from that. But back to your question, from a financial standpoint, a brand should get to a certain level. They should have accounts already. They should have a history that other buyers can look at to conduct business at a trade show and be successful.
So I'm not sure if if this will. So I have 2 questions I want to try with you. One is, what do you think about this idea of the virtual trade show model, the drawers, the new orders that are, that a lot of people have been putting, using while there's been COVID? Do you think those work, don't work? And do you think that they'll, that they're going to be more prevalent even after COVID?
I think that they have their place and that it works for now. I don't think it's a substitute though, because particularly fashion is something that you need to experience live. You need to feel the fabric. You need to see how it looks on a model, which is why trade shows, the designers have models. You can't, something looks limp on the hanger. You see it on a person. You see them walk in front of you with the lighting, real lighting, not a ring light. that I get to see it. So I think fashion is a live experience and not live on a screen. So I do believe that we need to go back to like art. I've seen we do art shows as well, and we've had virtual art shows, and it works as a replacement. I mean, as a temporary replacement, but it's not a replacement. You need to, again, seeing something on a screen and seeing it live are two different experiences, in my opinion. And I believe that some business will be conducted that way long term. I don't think all business will. I don't think it should be.
Even before COVID, there were buyers who would say, or even brands who would say that there were too many trade shows, that for certain markets that you were seeing less people show up because it was just too much. So what do you say to the fact that did you really need to have a show in Vegas and in LA and have market days at at Atlanta market, and then do New York? Was there too much, and do you think that post COVID we're going to see less, fewer trade shows, or more or trade shows become like more compacted?
I think there probably will be for a while, but that has more to do with the business and where fashion is right now from a business standpoint than it does with what's needed. But I think that the market dictates shows. So when shows fail, I've seen them fail. We came close to it once, but it's dictated by the market. When you don't do a good job, when you don't bring the right group of designers together, when you don't bring buyers to your show, you will fail. So I think the market will dictate that more than someone saying it.
Well, I mean, with 40,000 stores closing this year.
Yeah. That's what I mean. So I think there will be, that's what I meant from a business standpoint, the fashion industry is going to take some time it's going to need some time to come back. But I still believe it can. I believe fashion and has its place in our society. It's not, the clothes you wear on your back. It's a statement of who you are, particularly in areas, in urban areas. And the more urban, the more that has its place. And so I do believe it'll come back, but it'll take some time. But I believe that the market will dictate how that works and what makes it and what doesn't.
Okay, fair.
Demand, in other words. When I say market, I mean demand. Demand will dictate it, that by its success or failure.
And so with COVID, what kind of things are you working on now? I mean, because what are you doing these days?
Crossword puzzles. I'm more of an old school producer, and so I have not, several of my colleagues and people I know that in different companies have worked more on virtual events. I did not want to go there, so I just haven't done it. I'm very lucky that I've been doing this long enough that I also had a savings account and I could just, somebody asked me, when do you take time off? This past year, I took time off. I took the entire summer off last year, and it was great. I mean, not the reason I had to and everything, but I took it off. I went to the mountains. I went hiking. I stayed away from everybody. I took advantage of the time I had. But so I haven't done anything. I've done work, but I've done work that's more installation type work, things that you set up and you finish it and you leave it alone and it sits there for a while and you take it down at some future time. I've not done live events. So the last live event I did was March 2nd last year.
Wow, so that must be amazing. Oh, sorry, somebody's is coming in. So you finally have had a chance to recharge. So, now you're going to be, so are you seeing that things are coming back, or do you feel like it'll still be a while?
I think it's going to be a while, particularly, the events, not just trade show style, but events that I worked on were generally events with a larger number of guest attendants or things that traveled. So things that we just can't do now. And I think that's going to be a time, I'm hoping maybe by the end of this year, but I don't think before then, where we really put lots of people back together and feel safe about it.
Yeah,
that takes some time. So, and I don't want to do it either. I don't want to put myself in jeopardy of contracting a disease. I want to put other people at risk. I don't want to put the people that work for me in that risk either. So the work that we've done, we're very careful about what we do. We make sure the venue has its own rules. We limit the number of people that can set up, which takes longer. We used to bring lighting, audio, set people together, and we tramping on each other to get something done in a short time. So if somebody asks me to do something now, we just can't do that. And if the venue can't handle it, if the production sketch can't handle it, if the client can't pay for it, we don't do it.
Yeah, I think that's super smart. It's much more important to keep your people safe. I have one other quick question. Somebody's asking, what is the difference between a campaign and a trade show?
A trade show is an exhibition. It's a market where brands get together to sell. A campaign is an idea, a concept, sometimes to sell a particular product, but sometimes a little broader than that. So it executes itself over a number of features, part of which could be a trade show, but not completely. So a campaign is like when you see an ad on television that has a subtext to it. I'm trying to think of something in particular in mind. Well, the one we did for Revlon was Be Bold. And for an entire year, that was their campaign, was Be Bold. So how did they demonstrate that? They demonstrated that through a launch party, through the entertainers that they booked to sing about it. They had, they had a song written about it. They did advertisements and television about it. They did a whole series of trade shows, some business to business, some business to consumers, to represent it. So it involves some sort of creative concept, and how that concept is executed, I guess, would be how you define a campaign. And in the difference being a trade show is one little part of that, possibly.
And then what about any advice to these young people about, moving into the future? What are your thoughts? Well, I guess any thoughts about good advice, that you would like to give them about their career paths?
Yeah, I have no idea what they're all interested in, but I think one of the most important things to do, follow your heart, in the sense of what do you get something out of. One thing I've learned in the 30 some years I've been working is you have to make sure you're doing something that you have some passion towards, that you get some feeling of accomplishment from. And if you don't, that just becomes a job. And you can go, work at the 7-Eleven down the street for a job. For a career, you want to have something that you have some interest in, and that you get pleasure out of, not always in the way that you get pleasure out of going to a movie, but that you get accomplishment from. And so I would say follow your heart that way, towards something that gives you those feelings. And then you don't mind putting in the time. I've seen some questions about, do you feel burnt out and stuff, but I get some of that I get from my work. When you accomplish something and see something finished, you don't feel tired. You feel, I did it. So it is a level of performance that way that I think that passion carries you through, not only for that event, but for doing it for years on end.
Well, I think that's been completely amazing. I'm so, I'm so grateful for you. Danita, did you have any other questions for Rick?
I want to thank you for participating. This was really interesting, and I really appreciate your ending on that note, because that's something that we talk about all the time. is just really doing what you love and what's in your gut, and going for that. And I would also say it's really good to be aware of all that's going on in the industry right now, but I have every faith that this group of young people will find a place.
Me too. They're great kids, and they all have different interests, whether it be, whether it be journalism, PR, marketing, design. So we have a lot of different interests, all with some sort of fashion, subtext in it. But that's why we just want to be able to introduce them to people who work in all different facets of fashion, so that they can know what the future, what their future careers can be. So, and thank you so much for sharing your career with us, so that, they now know that this could be, potentially a career path for them. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And
Nice meeting everybody. Thank you.
yeah, thank you all, and have a great night. Thank you so much, Rick. We really
Night,
appreciate
everyone.
it.
Thank you so much.